Good morning. For those of you that's sitting too far that side, we have lots of empty table here. We have lots of good information. You might want to be close up so you could have some questions for our legal team, and the information could be very sensitive, and the closer you are, the better you get the view and you can communicate with them. Traditionally, we try to have several training sessions or discussion. This is one of the best training, in my opinion, the legal issues. For any business to be successful, two things is important. Actually, lots of things is important, but two basic things is knowing the law of the land. Understanding that. How many times you sign a contract or didn't know about this, ignorance of law is not an excuse. And for that, we have lots of good things prepared for you guys. The second thing in a business, you need to know the numbers. And lots of other things, customer service and everything else. For that, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panel, Mr. Jim Roberts, our legal advisor. By the way, he is a volunteer for years. He has no interest in ice cream business or any, he just does it purely from his heart. Chris Long is a longtime friend. He's also a CPA and he's a lawyer, legal counsel. And somehow Dylan squeezed himself into that panel. I don't know how. He just goes lobbies and does that. But no, seriously, he also has some issues about the inclusion. So our social importance of having the social responsibility of inclusion and things that sometimes lots of employers take for granted, and it's very important to be aware of and be sensitive to. With that, I pass it on to the panel. Please give them a round of applause.
Thank you, Haas. Let me just get this bag out of the way before we trip on it. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay. We're going to have some fun here. So, you know, we've got serious, informative, educational topics, but, you know, if we have a little fun with it, the material sometimes is easier to learn and get our arms wrapped around kind of thorny issues. So, you know, a couple quick thoughts before I get it started. First, everybody just relax. Okay, this is the last day of the convention. Everybody in this room has made a tremendous decision. Okay, I can't tell you, when I come to the convention, and Jim could testify to this as well, although I'm not going to make him testify, because he'll beat me out of that. But the point I'm trying to make is that when I come and when Jim comes, people come up to us all the time and say, "Can I have 10 minutes? Can I have 10 minutes? Can I have 10 minutes?" Which we love. We love to spend as much time with you as possible. But now you have an hour and a half with us. Okay, so I know there's lots of things that when you come to the convention you think, I want 10 minutes with Jim. Seize this opportunity. We're here for you. We've got some prepared materials that we're going to go over, and then we're going to have time for discussion. And any topic, question, something of interest to you is open. We have a very diverse panel. We can handle a wide range of issues. And we have a microphone down here by the president. And all that we ask is that if you have a question, when we get to the appropriate time, go to the microphone. Otherwise, we can't hear.
I would deliver the microphone.
Even better.
Anybody has a question.
You cannot get this level of service outside of the convention. Okay? All right. You'll see on the screen practical tips for employment challenges. Now, that's the general topic. Okay, we've got 3 or 4 different parts. I want to introduce those real quickly so you can kind of see what we're trying to accomplish in a broad sense. Mr. Dillon has enlightened me to things that are over my head. So much that after he talked for a while, I said, Dillon, you're going to have to present this yourself. Okay? So he's joined our panel, and I apologize that Jim and I, as old dudes stuck in our way, didn't have the foresight to think about problems other than what we normally think of. Otherwise, we would have had Dillon in it from the beginning. So I apologize to Dillon that his name's not on the first slide. Just didn't have time to get it updated properly. The focal points are going to be as such. I'm going to talk a little bit about new changes in the laws as regards to overtime that are going to take effect January 1st, 2017. Oh. Repeat after me. Don't shoot the messenger. Okay? But I got some practical tips and some examples. We're going to work through it. It's going to be okay. Okay? It's going to be okay. I mean, goodness gracious, we're in the ice cream business. We know a little something about solving problems. We're going to segue into dealing with employment challenges as they relate to complaints, incidents, these types of things in your work environment. Okay? At that point, I'm going to transition to Mr. Rafaty, and he's going to talk about some issues that you need to be aware of in regards to social inclusion, the process, the communication, these types of things from a legal standpoint, that when you're involving people in your and accessibility, when you're involving people in your organization from a social inclusion standpoint, you need to be aware of. And you need to be aware of them because you want that to be a successful relationship and a successful employee. And so he has some hot topic points on that. We're going to go to him. Then Mr. Roberts, who is the most knowledgeable of us all, is going to talk to us about the topic of sexual harassment in the workplace. He, in working with members, in working with his own practice, in working with his own businesses, has a wealth of knowledge on a lot of topics, but I've asked him to bring us some information, some real-world examples, some anecdotal stories about that. Okay? At the conclusion of that, then we'll go into our questions and answers, and as I said, please, just because these are the topics we prepared, we have 5 or 6 other topics we could talk about at a moment's notice. So we're ready, willing, and able to discuss whatever hot-button issue you might have in your mind. So please be ready to challenge us. Okay? And please don't walk out of the room with a head full of questions. When you come to the convention, you get these wonderful opportunities like our keynote speaker yesterday. If your company wanted to hire that gentleman, you might have to spend $8,000, $10,000. He gave us a special rate, but these are very valuable opportunities. Don't let them just slip by. So if you have something that you want to talk about, that's why we're here today. Please make your voice heard. You've already understood our purpose and goals. Okay, we've already gone through that. I'm going to skip past that. Okay, disclaimer. Okay, Jim and I don't know everything about everything. Now, Jim and I are going to tell you we know everything about everything, but that's just because we got big egos. But we don't know everything about everything. Okay. And it's difficult for us to perfectly address every situation on the fly. We got lots of states, we have different countries, so, please give us the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes we think through these answers, but maybe there's some municipality that is totally different. Be kind, don't shame us, and just keep that information to yourself when we're wrong. Okay? But seriously, what we're trying to do is say, hey, you're an employer, you're a manager, you're a company owner. Okay? You need to have a working knowledge of what you're doing. Like Haas said, when ignorance of the law is not an excuse. Now, what happens is sometimes when you don't have much knowledge on a topic, you don't feel comfortable talking to even your own attorney because you think, well, that might be a stupid question to ask, and I don't want him to think I'm stupid. Or you might have an insurance company that you're working with, and you're fearful. So what we're trying to do is give you some working knowledge so when you're in these situations, you have a foundation, okay, to move forward on. You kind of know what's going on, and then you can ask those intelligent questions that you as a business leader or owner need the information to solve your own problems. So please understand what this is. We're trying to empower you. Okay. Sometimes when Jim and I work with members, one of the tough things is that we understand that the challenge you're facing may not be right or just or fair. Our goal is to help you solve the riddle, to help you prevent the unfair. Okay? So when we go through this, some of this information you may think, well, geez, Chris or Jim, I mean, that's just patently unfair and crazy. You need to divorce yourself from that thought for a minute so you can let this information come in. Don't be defensive. Okay? Absorb this information, and just like the speaker said, he gave many quotes yesterday that, you know, the goal is to understand all sides. Okay? So we're going to try to present information. Don't be defensive about it initially. Let's absorb the information. We understand, Jim and I understand that the problem you may be facing is unfair. It is unjust. It's not right. But we have to get past that initial roadblock so we can delve into where the solutions are. So sometimes in our mind we create these barriers that keep us from actually reaching the end of the problem. So we're going to focus on ethical business solutions to real-world challenges. We've got examples, etc. Okay, let's go into the meat here. So, as many of you might know, and everybody on your desk should have a copy of the slides. Okay, and on this first particular topic, for those of you that just want to show me that I'm wrong, I've got additional materials. Okay, and you're welcome to get these, and if we need more copies, this is about 8 or 9 pages from the Fair Labor Department. So, right now there's something you need to understand. Every employee is eligible for overtime. Every employee is eligible for overtime. Lock the doors, don't anybody run out. Just relax. We're going to work through this. Okay? Unless they meet an exception. Okay? Unless they meet an exception. We're going to go through those exceptions. If you've been around and you see 60 Minutes or these news programs, sometimes they have a story from, say, New York City. Sanitation engineer, retiring at 52 years old with a beach house. Have you seen these types of stories ever before? No, nobody's ever seen any TV? Nobody watches any TV? Okay, maybe you haven't seen, or maybe you're just thinking, oh my God, where's this going? But just relax. Okay, the reason why the sanitation engineer is retiring younger than we are, with a beautiful beach house that we're jealous of, is because he's eligible for overtime. And in a lot of these cities, he made a unionized wage, overtime, holiday pay, etc. And he accumulated a nice level of wealth. And it's commendable. And that's why they profile these individuals. Okay? Factory workers that have done the same in aviation and other industries. I know you've seen this. And you might be thinking, wow, the guy was making $87,000 a year in a salary, and he was getting overtime. Okay? Well, you have to understand that at the outset, every employee, I don't care if they make $250,000 a year, and you pay him on a salary, he's eligible for overtime. Let's say meet 1 of 3 exceptions. We're going to go through them. Okay. Exceptions to the general rule. Executive employees paid on a salary. Okay? Now look, you need to focus on these words. Every one of these words in the exception, you need to get your arms wrapped around and say, how do I apply that? Because I just gave you bad news. I didn't want to give you the bad news, but I did. So let's get serious for a second. Okay? Executive employees paid on a salary. Let's read it. Primary duty must be managing the enterprise. Okay, who's that? Upper level management. Right? Everybody gets that. That makes sense. Okay? What else? Or, oh, wait a minute. Let's continue. Or managing a customarily recognized department or subdivision of the enterprise. Relief. Whew. Did it say how many departments a company can have? Is there any numbers up there? Does anyone can see it? It's still up there, isn't it? Getting a little worried that it's not up there. It doesn't say that. Does it say how many subdivisions you can have? Okay, focus on this, guys. This is going to be the solution to the problem in a minute. We already know what the problem is. All your employees are eligible for overtime. Oh boy. Okay. Unless they're an executive employee. Or, number 2, administrative employees. What is their duty? They have to be able to exercise discretion and independent judgment with respect to matters of significance. Okay, I hope one thing you're noticing when we go back and forward is that they've used some terminology here like with respect to matters of significance. Hallelujah! Jump up and down. They didn't tell you what a matter of significance was. They didn't tell you what a subdivision or a department was. But they're going to leave that up to you. Okay, so that's where we're going with this. Now there's a third exception, and I just want you to forget about it. Okay, but it's there, and you might hear about it. Professional employees. These are people that have scientific backgrounds. And when I say scientific, you'll notice that it says requires advanced knowledge in a field of science or learning that requires invention, imagination, or originality, or talent in a recognized field. Wow, that one there, they really put some specificity in there. A recognized field. So we can't arbitrarily come up with, well, this guy's a real professional at pulling ice cream out of the warehouse. You understand? This guy's really a professional at changing our tires. Okay, a recognized field. We're not going to spend much time on 3. There's not much opportunity on 3. Okay, now if you got a plant, if you got some specific technologies, maybe you're there. But for most of us, forget it. Okay. Practical tip. Practical tip. You better go back and you better review the job descriptions for any employee that works more than 40 hours a week. If you have employees that are working more than 40 hours a week and they don't have a job description, but you think they're exempt because they're administrative, well, they may have a different opinion. Well, what's going to decide that? He said, she said, right? Well, job description could become the foundational savior for you. So you need to go back, get those job descriptions together. Okay, is the employee executive in nature? Now, think about this for a minute.
Chris, I'm sorry. I'm sure there are some people here, they do not have a job description for their employees.
We're going to go through it.
Thank you.
We got an example coming up. Haas is 2 steps ahead of me. I think he snuck in and looked at my slides. Okay, good question, my friend. Are they executive in nature? Do they manage a recognized department or subdivision? Now, let me tell you something that as employers we like to do. We like to make it seem like, you know, there's not a person in my organization that does anything that I don't know what they do, and I've approved everything they're going to do, and they have no management authority because I'm the head honcho. I'm the big boss. Okay? So you need to put that to the side for a minute. You know, we want to have policies and procedures and controls and efficiencies, right? Okay, let's liberate our thinking for a second. Is the employee managing a recognized department of your company? Okay, or are they administrative, and do they have the ability to exercise independent judgment and discretion? Okay, don't pigeonhole your employees. Don't go back and write up a bunch of job descriptions that make it sound like they got to come to you before they can get water from the office coffee room. Okay? Sometimes we do that type of stuff because we think, well, that's what a really well-run machine does. We button everything down. Nobody can do anything without my stamp of approval. Well, that's fine, but just understand that those people are eligible for overtime, and you're responsible for paying them overtime. Okay? Now, the other thing is go down and look around. You know, sometimes as owners and top-level managers, we think we know what's going on in the warehouse. We think we know what's going on in the route sales department. But we have a high-level view. And when we go down there, we realize, well, actually, lots of decisions are being made. Lots of independent judgment is coming in. Now, it's not for the overall company, but in their department, yes, absolutely. How they pick the ice cream, how they load the trucks, how they do these types of things. There's lots of little decisions being made. Get down there. Look around. Keep your mouth shut and just say, what's going on really? And you might have to spy on them, because if they see you, they're all going to act like they're not making any decisions, because you've already told them, don't make any decisions. Okay? So get down there, look around, see what's going on, and come up with a job description. Okay, I've already told you about the professional classification. Okay? Beware of that. That's one where they got lots of official words in it, like recognized field of science, and this and that. It's a mine pit. Okay, it's a mine pit. Just beware of it. Recognized field or artistic or creative endeavor. Okay, well, to me, selling ice cream is an artistic and creative endeavor. But I think I got a lot better chance if I focus on their independent decision making and their discretion. Okay, so I don't want to get into what's a profession. Okay, let's go through an example just to try to drive this home. Haas already hit the nail on the head. Joe works in the warehouse. He works 50 hours a week. The company is a great company. They pay Joe $2,000 a week to work in the warehouse. Joe, by my calculations, is making $104,000 a year. I would like to apply for a position working right beside Joe. Sounds like a fantastic company. They can't be treating Joe any better in my book, but Joe's 100% eligible for overtime. Boy, that doesn't feel fair. Doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel just. But it's the truth. He's 100% eligible for overtime. Why? Does Joe have any executive responsibilities based on what little you know he's doing? No. Does he have administrative duties? Not to our knowledge. He's not a professional by a recognized field. I mean, he might be a real pro. You understand? That's a terminology, but be careful with that. So let's go to the second example. Joe's the warehouse manager. He works 50 hours a week. Okay? What's his job duties? First off, the warehouse, you need to let Joe know, hey, Joe, this is a mission-critical department. If the warehouse department is not functioning properly, the whole company comes to a grind. And we all know that's the truth, so let's write it down. Okay? Let's be honest. And then let's figure out, what does he manage? Well, he manages unloading product from suppliers. He manages the process of loading the route trucks. There could be 100 of those trucks. That's a lot of management. Think about managing 100 employees or 100 assets. Okay? That's a lot of responsibility. He's in fulfillment of customer orders. So he's an executive in our organization. He's an executive. What else? Joe is allowed to use some independent judgment and discretion on product rotation, inventory stock, future demands. Maybe Joe has a direct line of communication to the person that makes out the order. And maybe the person that makes out the order relies on Joe's discretion or advice. And even if you have an automated system and everything's perfect, I bet there's times where Joe has to get on the phone and say, we got a problem with the automated system. You think we've got so many fudge bars, but we don't. The system's messed up. And if he has that ability to pick up that phone independently and make those type of calls, does he know how to handle product that comes back? Okay, so that's Joe. Okay, now Joe's only paid $500 a week. This Joe makes a fraction of what the old Joe makes. But he's an executive employee in our determination. He's an administrative employee in our determination. He's exempt from overtime. Okay, now that doesn't seem right. The other guy was making a lot more money. Okay, but you have to understand that the law is not out there trying to determine what the market rate for the warehouse manager is. That's your job. They're going to let the market handle that. They're trying to determine which classifications of employees are eligible for overtime. Okay? So sometimes we can think, well, as long as I pay him a lot of money, everything's cool. And it might be, unless he leaves and files a complaint, and then you've got an overtime issue. And he worked for you for 10 years, and that's a lot of hours, etc. So this is why, to Haas's credit, when he said a minute ago, he's ahead of the game with me. Job descriptions. Okay? Now, could someone come in and say, hey, Chris, I don't think he's an executive employee because A, B, and C? Yes. Yes. But I have something to say. I have points and counterpoints. It's legitimate. It's ethical. I'm not trying to skirt the law. Now, if you have nothing to say. And it's just you trying to explain what you've been doing. Get this stuff down. Okay, now, why are we really talking about this? Okay, under the current law, right now it says that if you have an employee and you pay him in a salary, could be a weekly, monthly salary, and he's an executive, an administrative, or professional employee who makes more than $23,660 a year, he's exempt from overtime. So Joe, who's making $500 a week, right now, he's making $25,000 a year, $26,000 a year. I'm not a mathematician, just a humble ice cream man. Okay? He's exempt based on his job description. I've explained that to Joe. He's paid in a salary. He makes more than $23,660. The new law, which takes effect on January 1st, says, well, that's outdated. And quite frankly, maybe doesn't pass the smell test. You know, that a guy, you're going to tell me a guy $23,000 a year isn't going to be able to earn overtime. You know, society's changing in how we view these things. And so they've said, okay, we're going to bump it up to $47,000. Okay, so on effective January 1st, this is why we're covering this topic, is that you need to be aware that if you've got people that are working more than 40 hours a week and you pay them in a salary and they're executive employees and they make $35,000 a year, they are eligible for overtime. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? Well, one second, Carl, but does everybody understand what I'm saying? Any signs of life? What they do, that's a great question. Yes. If the employee on an annualized basis is going to make less than 47, do not pass go. Do not go to step 2. Don't worry about any other questions. If the employee makes $38,000 a year annualized, and what I mean by annualized, just so you know, is they don't expect that everybody you're going to hire January 1st. You're going to bring someone in June. You're going to pay them a salary. Well, the guy may, or the lady may not make $47,000 because they're only working for you for 6 months. Don't worry about that. They take their weekly or their monthly rate, whatever your pay rate is, and they calculate that out and say, well, what would he or she have made over the year? You follow me? But Alan Barish is absolutely right. If it's under 47,000, don't pass go. So don't worry about whether they're administrative or executive. They're eligible for overtime. The government has made a decision at this point that if you make under $47,000 a year, you're eligible for overtime as a matter of principle. Now, could that be changed? Yes. We have a new president coming in. Could this be changed? Yes. I have not heard this discussed in the campaign. I'm talking about in the United States of America. So it's discriminatory that I'm not even talking about Canada. But please file your lawsuits with Jim. Could that be changed? Yes, but what I'm trying to say is that this was not a hot button issue in the campaign. And I'm going to tell you why. I think when you're talking about someone that's making $25,000, $30,000, $35,000 a year, it's very difficult for someone like me to stand up and try to explain how they're not eligible for overtime. There's just a gut feeling there, and I don't think any political candidate or any party in Congress has a political will to make a change on this. Could it happen? Yes. They might decrease the jump. You follow me? They might say, look, the current law says 23,660. We're going to go to 32,000. And then in 4 years, we're going to go to 40. They could do some changes there. Okay. Carl, are you okay?
I need a mic going there. We can't hear you.
I'll repeat it. Yes, yes. Go ahead. What's the point?
We should.
We'll get there. We'll get to the math. Okay, that question was about the computation of overtime as it pertains to the minimum, to the overtime regulations. Very good question. We're going to get there. Okay, so now we've gone through practical tip number 1, which speaks to, oh my goodness, everybody's eligible for overtime. And during peak season, they're all working like crazy, and they're accumulating these hours, and what am I going to do, and how am I going to fix this problem, and I'm in big trouble. We went through a tip and an example of how to try to help the situation. Okay? But, like Alan said, very insightful, well, what are you going to do with those people that don't make $47,000 a year? Practical tip number 1 isn't going to do you any good. Because if they don't make the threshold level, the exemptions don't apply. Okay. So we're going to do a practical tip, then we're going to go through an example. And this example is directly based off of what lots of industries are doing. And lots of seasonal operators are doing. Golf courses, resorts, etc. They have this issue. They've been studying this issue for a while now and trying to figure out, well, how do they cope with peak season in the ski business, the beach business, the golf business, whatever. Okay, well, first thing you got to do is get back, say we got an issue here. We need to start a good system of tracking hours. Now, you cannot afford anymore, under these rules, to just let people hang out. Okay? Sometimes we have employees that they come back, they don't necessarily have some place immediately that they got to go to. They come in, they sit down, they talk to the supervisor, they wait for the other employees to show up, they're talking, they're the last guy to leave. Now, the last 2 hours of the day, they really don't do anything to benefit you, the employer. And quite frankly, the reason why we've allowed them to stay there is it'd be rude to say, hey, Joe, get out of here. You're not working. You're not benefiting me. I want you to leave the property. Well, we don't want to do that. I mean, what a negative mentality. But we've got to understand that we have to start moving in that direction. So you go back, you start explaining this to your people. You let them know that, hey, we have to track hours on certain employees. And some of these employees may say, I'm salary. You're offending me. I'm not an hourly employee. That's part of their identity. And that's why I say there could politically be a small change in this law, is that there is large groups of people that are making $40,000, $42,000, $45,000 a year that take pride in the fact that they've earned a salaried position, and they do not want to be seen or viewed as an hourly employee. They feel that there's a stigma there. Okay? Unfortunately, with this landscape, you have to go back and explain to those employees that, listen, there's going to be a change in the law. Okay? I have to track hours. Does it mean you have to take that employee and say you're not a salaried employee? No. There's nothing in here that says you can't pay on a salary. Just make sure that that person's not accumulating more than 40 hours a week. Okay? That's how you avoid the overtime. Now let's go through another example. Let's say you say, man, we got a problem. We got some people that make $35,000 a year. They're some of our best employees, and when we are in peak season, we need them 50 hours a week. But I already pay them a fair salary. They're happy with their salary. They do a good job for their salary. Why should I change? Well, you already know you got a problem. They're eligible for overtime. Okay? So let's go through it. This is kind of touches on what Carl's talking about. Practical tip. This is an example. Joe works 50 hours a week. He makes $600 a week. Joe's annual salary is going to be $31,200. I hope that's right. Nobody do the math. Just leave it be if it's wrong. Just don't say anything if it's wrong. Okay, he's eligible for overtime. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're just going to sweat it? Hope no problems ever come up between you and Joe? No complaints ever come up? Maybe. Or you're going to do what the golf courses are doing. You're going to do what the properties like this are doing, is you're going to have to go like this. You're going to have to pay Joe $11 an hour. His current hourly rate, I don't even know what it is, but it's more than $11 an hour, you see? For the first 40 hours, you're going to pay him $11 an hour. He's going to make $440. He's going to work 10 hours of overtime. You need him. You have to have him. You can't trim him back. He's overtime eligible. You're going to have to pay him the overtime rate, time and a half. Based on his hourly salary, it's going to be $16.50 for those extra 10 hours. He's going to make $165. Joe now makes $605 a week. He works 50 hours a week. Has Joe been negatively impacted? Has Joe been negatively impacted? Anybody? No. Is Joe mad? Is Joe going to quit? Is Joe going to walk out? No, he's fine. The only thing you've done here is made sure you're in compliance with the law. Joe makes the same amount of money. Joe's going to work 50 hours. Joe actually makes $5 more. Hey, if I was generous and I'm not, I could have gone to 610 a week. Okay? I mean, think about that just for a second. When you go back and you have to deal with a thorny issue, maybe you do structure it to where he actually makes a little bit more. 25 bucks a week. But Joe now perceives that information. It's not negative to him. You're in compliance with the law. He's going to work 50 hours a week. Now, let me tell you the trouble spot here. Okay? And this is what the golf courses are now dealing with. This is what the resorts are now dealing with. You say, okay, Chris, everything works as long as Joe works 50 hours a week. But let's say you get into your slow season and you say, Joe, I don't need you the 10 extra hours. I'm only going to work you 40, and I'm only going to pay you $440 a week because that's what I'm legally required to do based on our arrangement. That's up to you and God. Okay? You're going to have to look at this information. You're going to have to say, I have to convert to this system, and am I going to find, if I really want to keep Joe at 600, then I got to find 10 hours worth of work for him to do during the slow season. But you understand that that's a real issue that's happening. That's one downside of this whole situation that's happening in seasonal businesses. Those employees that are saying, great, I work the same amount of hours, I get paid the same amount of money, everything's fine, golf course, it's December, and the guy goes, wow, this is really negatively impacting me. So you need to get out ahead of that, at least get it into your mind now that that could be an issue, and you need to be thinking about how you're going to address it with your team, etc. Okay? You could obviously take these numbers and adjust so that maybe in the peak season Joe makes $700 a week. But then in the low season, his hourly rate does go down, but maybe on an annualized basis or on a quarterly basis, you're still getting him about the same level of compensation. So, there's nothing that says you can't pay Joe $10 an hour or $12 an hour or whatever. You got to make the math work. You've got the slide. That's the idea. That's the idea. Yes. Alan, sorry.
Are you being judged based on annual salary, or do you pay a salary plus a bonus? Bonus working through total remuneration, or is it just?
Great question. And for those that want to get deep down, I've got an 8-page handout. I don't think I can give a simple answer to that question because there's a lot of different facts and circumstances. The question was, if you didn't hear it, you pay a bonus, a monthly, quarterly, annual bonus. How does that factor into all this? Okay, it does factor in. There's information here. If that's something that is specific to you or you really want to get your arms wrapped around this, I've got some more information. Good question. Okay, now we're going to transition to a new topic, but it's distinctly related to the first one. You already know you've got a sensitive issue now that you've got to deal with, unfortunately. And you don't want to deal with it, but you got to deal with it. Because believe me, if you don't deal with it and you have a large organization or a small organization, it doesn't matter, and somebody files a complaint, you're going to have a problem. Okay, but you know you got a sensitive issue in the workplace. So one other practical tip that gets into our second point here is, okay, where do we go from here? In other words, how do I mitigate potential additional issues? Well, you got the EEOC out there, you got the Department of Human Rights, you got the Wage and Hour Division, and these are the people that judge employee incidents and complaints. And you know the world's gotten more complex. So we're going to talk briefly about this before I go to Dylan. This is a very short segment. I wanted to spend most of my time on the overtime. Okay, first thing to understand is that if one of your employees file a complaint, you're going to lose. Now, I'm not saying you're going to lose the decision, okay? But you're going to lose time, you're going to lose money, you're going to lose stress, you're going to lose distraction, you may have to pay an attorney. You don't win. There's no winning. Don't think ever that, well, I won. Well, trust me, when you get the legal bill, you go, I didn't win. Okay? So let's get these things, let's figure out a way to get these issues resolved. So Any employee, any contractor, any customer can go online and file a complaint against you or your company in about 10 minutes. Okay, the EEOC's job, the Department of Human Rights, which is a state-by-state based counterpart, is not to do an initial fact-finding investigation. It's to receive the complaint and forward it to you for an answer. So sometimes you may get something and say, well, this is nonsensical. This guy was my customer. This guy was a retail store owner. Why is he complaining against me? You're involved. You've got to file an answer. You're spending time, you're spending energy, you're working. Okay, there's no easy way out. The system is designed to drive towards a mediation, a resolution. The people who work in the agencies are not sitting there thinking, well, we're going to interview everybody and we're going to make it. They want you to get towards a quick and easy resolution because they know this is messy business and that there's two sides to every story and that some of what they're hearing is true and some of what they're not hearing is true. And the best people to resolve the matter are you and the person with the complaint, whether it be a contractor, employee, customer. So they're going to drive you towards that. There's not you just can't file a quick response and they say, hey, done. You know, like Michael Jordan hitting a three and then, you know, backing up. That doesn't happen, okay? So recognize right now in your organization that your employees do not have your level of adaptability, flexibility, emotional maturity, self-confidence, stress management, physical and psychological well-being, and your ability to be a tremendous public speaker. Okay? Those are innate skills that you as the leader of your organization has in spades. Not everybody in your organization has those. That's where friction occurs. Something you're comfortable speaking about or a change that you're adaptable to, they may not possess the same tools, coping mechanisms, etc., to get through it. Okay, always remember the employee-employer relationship is a business relationship. You have to handle all complaints, incidents, terminations professionally. Okay? Document your actions. Okay? Good faith actions to eradicate problems go a long way in these challenges. Always, always, always communicate your expectations to new hires and existing hires immediately, early. Don't wait for the problem to come up and then tell them your policy. Tell them your policy right away. Okay? Communicate throughout the organization early and often your desire to have a positive work environment on all key areas. Bullying is a huge issue right now. It's a workplace issue. It's a school issue. Okay? If your employees don't know exactly where you stand on bullying, you're going to have a bullying problem. Seems silly that adults are going to bully each other. It happens. It's affecting people. Harassment, discrimination, all these important topics. We're going to go to a quick example. Almost done. Example one, Jim. Jim is an employee of an ice cream company. He doesn't know much about the management. He just got hired. He shows up and all the senior employees tell Jim he's the new guy. And the new guy gets to do all the worst jobs. And they think it's kind of funny. And maybe it is kind of funny, but it doesn't feel good to Jim. Jim doesn't have the same level of emotional maturity, self-confidence that you do. Remember that. Jim quits. He walks out the door. He goes to the State Department of Human Rights, and he says, I was bullied, and I've quit. It was hostile. Management is shocked. Anytime you get a complaint from, I'll tell you from my personal experience, when I hear a complaint from my organization, I'm always shocked. Because I think, don't they know that that's not who I am? That I wouldn't tolerate that? But maybe the new guy didn't know me, and he was affected, and now he's gone. And he's filing with an agency, and now I have to deal with Jim through that agency. Okay. Example two. Jim's a new hire. The management of XYZ makes a personal connection with Jim. Jim understands their policies. He sees their policies posted. He reads the policies. Jim is in the work environment and he feels bullied. And he thinks to himself, Alan Barish just told me how serious he takes bullying. I better go tell Alan about this right away. So that problem then comes into your door. You can sit down with them, hear that person, because the person knows Alan's going to want to know this is going on. Alan's now in control of the problem. He can solve the problem that day. Okay? And that all was set up simply because the employee already knew where Alan stood. They weren't in their mind thinking, well, maybe Alan thinks this is just the way it is, or maybe he thinks that's cool. And so they feel confident. They know who to approach. They know that stuff. Okay. So get out early and often. If your employees don't know where you stand, they're going to assume that don't assume that they're going to think that you only want the best things. They may be too intimidated to even approach you on it. They may not have the self-confidence or the public speaking to come up to you. Okay. Practical tip number 2, be careful to safeguard your employee's ego. I got the biggest ego in the room. Okay? You know, sometimes we need to realize that the person walking in the door could be fragile, could have all kinds of things going on in their life. And your immediate response, if you protect that employee's ego, you've earned their respect, humble yourself a little bit, make them feel welcome, you're approachable, be thankful. Okay? Lots of times the person that's coming in with the problem doesn't want anything other than to be heard and maybe get a solution, right? So just be inviting. Be that person. Okay? When you have to terminate an employee, be especially careful of their ego. And when I say ego, that's like a bad word. But understand that each one of us have emotions. We can get hurt. Sometimes when someone gives us bad news, it feels personal. Even when you say it's not personal, sometimes it feels personal. And then when I leave, I start thinking, you know, those guys, I worked there every goddamn week for 50 hours a week, and I never got a red cent of overtime. Never got a cent. And I gave my soul to that company, and now they just terminated me. And they go home and they talk to someone else and say, well, what do you mean you didn't get overtime? See how this can happen just like this? Okay. Your employee is going to report what happens to him to his friends, his family, his spouse, and his loved ones. He needs to know why he was terminated. Quick example. Bill, your skills are more limited than I thought. I just can't use you. Goodbye. Bill goes home. His wife says, why'd you get fired? You just put that gentleman in a really tough position. And his family that loves him is going to say, you've got all the skills in the world. That's not right. Just like you would for your loved ones. Versus, Bill, I apologize to you, sir. You know, I put you in the wrong spot. It's my mistake. I put you in this department. That's not the right fit for you. This department's the right fit for you. Right now I don't have an opening there. You're on the top of my list. Bill goes home, says, guys, terrible day. I just got terminated. But the boss came to me and said, I really got a lot of great skills. He apologized to me. He let me know that he put me in the wrong spot. And he told me I'm his top candidate for his next opening in the right department. You understand that? Bill's still terminated. Bill is still terminated. Bill's not coming to work tomorrow. But Bill went home, and you know what? He had a positive thing to say. He didn't leave on a bad note. He's not embarrassed. He's not ashamed to go home and tell his family, I just got terminated because they really don't need me. They can't work with someone like me. Okay? And that's lots of times the message that people walk out with. You need to protect that person's ego and give them something to say. Otherwise, the people around them may say, you weren't treated fairly. I think you should file a complaint. Now you got a problem. Okay. Final thing, never rush the tough stuff. Remember, your employees have a different level of adaptability, flexibility, emotional maturity, self-confidence, stress management, psychological and physical well-being. They are not equipped to handle bad news like you are. In business, as a leader, you handle bad news all the time. You have developed a skill set at dealing with problems. They don't have that yet. Or maybe they do, but they don't have your emotional maturity. They don't have your self-confidence, okay? So please, you got the overtime information. You've got how to treat your people. Understand that you're going to have some sticky situations, and how you deal with your people is going to determine whether those sticky situations become big problems or small problems. Now, I'd like to turn it over to my good friend Dylan, who's going to talk about some key issues in employment law as they relate to social inclusion.
I just have a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Jim.
You didn't let us ask questions. You went over us. First of all, we all know when the IRS man shows up, he's looking for revenue. We know when the wage and hour man shows up what he's looking for. I know very little bit about this. I've learned a lot this morning from him because this hadn't been my forte. But my question is this. We've directed our entire discussion about where a complaint from a, quote, employee emanates. My question is, for you, is what about the fact that, in my experience, very far away from this, they generally do not audit you based on wage and hour, at least up until now. Second part of that question is, it's been my experience that the IRS is often delegated, having been an IRS attorney many, many years ago, about 40 years ago, that they are delegated to do referrals. If they see something, they don't have time to try to take your money on legal issues about how you report your income. So have you had any experience where these complaints are not coming from the, quote, employees, but they are coming from an audit, for example, of your wage and hour issue?
Good question, and personally, I have not seen a independent audit without a complaint on this issue. Certainly, in a unionized environment or a major factory environment, they could do their own, certainly could do their own independent checking up. And it's generally complaint-driven. That's why the second part of that discussion about how you're going to deal with your people, how you're going to communicate is so mission critical to everything you're going to do to mitigate potential complaints that are going to lead to liability. So why don't we do this? Let's go to Dylan, and then we're going to have opportunity for question on any subject at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Long, and good morning, everyone. So I, as you all know, many of you, I focus on the social inclusion aspect, and I'll be targeting specifically two different communities, specifically two communities that are passionately involved within the convention of all the goers here, that are veterans, our U.S. veterans, as well as veterans with disabilities, specifically post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as all people with disabilities. And I had a great privilege to speak to Mr. Long Monday night briefly about what I wanted to cover here today. And there's there's the process, there is the communication aspect from an employment perspective, as well as accessibility. From a process procedure standpoint, I told Mr. Long, and I'm telling you here today, is that when we're trying to outreach from a social inclusive aspect, it is important that we have a more of a 90-day grace period from the first 90 days of employment. And I'm pretty sure that's standard, Mr. Roberts, correct me if I'm wrong, pretty standard for all employees. And many of this information that I'm going to repeat to you is pretty much the same thing for all employees, not just veterans and people with disabilities. To set up weekly and monthly goals for the new hire of the company. That is specifically important through the communication aspect of how they're doing on the job, what are their specific tasks, are they doing well, are they meeting deadlines, etc. Another is those follow-up meetings. This is the great opportunity to welcome the new hire in a more meaningful aspect of the business, to engage with the employee in a business setting that is welcoming and inclusive environment, or integrating more of the team building events for the employees. Sure, it's just accepting the individual, noticing that the individual sees that you are accepting and aware and willing to go into to provide that inclusive matter for that veteran or that person with a disability. And then also, like Mr. Long stated in the slides, is to keep records of your communication. It is crucial. It's because it actually, for this community, specifically people with disabilities, you can reiterate that line of communication when you're going through that first 90 days of employment. So with that, I go through communication. And this is where I'm very passionate about, is to how to be an effective communicator when educating, or in a way delivering an expectation, or know that the individual with the disability, or veterans specifically with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD is what they call it, and I call it PTS, just don't like the word disorder. But from that standpoint, we want to make sure from the day one, before they get hired, to the day 90, when they are, in the position of getting guaranteed that job position, is that we want to make sure that they know from inside and out of every aspect of the business. They understand that they need to meet deadlines. They need to have that type of specific job description. I also want to say, Mr. Long, I appreciate you sharing that information about the department, about the bill example. That is a great example specifically for this community. They might apply for something, and it may not be the best fit for them. Maybe sometimes it's a different position, and you can sort of accommodate in that situation to adapt them to a different department, and you prevent legalities of those kind of issues and concerns. Another thing is, when I brought the speaker last year, well, thank you to IAICDV and the management team to make that happen. One thing that he brought up, and that really relates to this community, is to set that bar high, those first 90 days, to tell these individuals that we expect you to be held accountable. Each and every new employee have a set of expectations that needs to be delivered, and it means to communicate effectively in a way that tell them, look, we hold you accountable for these situations. But at the same time, where I'm coming from a provider standpoint, for some of you who don't know, I am a provider that focuses on employment and training initiatives for all stakeholders. Employers, providers, and employees all have certain expectations, but in reality, each of them are held accountable because each of them have a fair part. They have a fair part to ultimately help the employee, new employee, to become successful, but also ultimately it helps the employer to become successful. New employees, they know what they need to do, they know what they're expected to do, but ultimately they're raised to become successful employees that ultimately helps your business, okay? The reason I'm sharing all of this, and I know this is completely different from last year, I really want to help you guys and really be that resource to you when outreaching to providers or to myself, and advise you in a way on how to define a proper system. But this 90 days is really crucial when reaching out, being inclusive, when reaching out to veterans and people with disabilities. Last thing I wanted to discuss is the accessibility part. The accessibility is in relation to the ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act, that passed in July 26 of 1990. This is our 26 years. The biggest takeaway of the ADA is the minimum ADA requirements. And I'll give you a couple examples of those minimum ADA requirements. Previously, my dad this morning said we should have a table up here to make it more of an intimate panel discussion. This was accessible because I thought the original plan we were going to stand. But this was a a minimum ADA requirement from a convention standpoint. Another standpoint is wheelchair accessibility. When I think of wheelchair accessibility, if you stand up and take 5 to 7 steps in a line, that gives you an understanding of how long the hallways have to be to make it a wheelchair accessibility for that person to wheelchair in, okay, or someone with cerebral palsy. Another example is allowing them to use their assistive devices. There are some people, they have a text-to-speech devices that are from a tablet standpoint, and they already have that. So sometimes we want to encourage employers to accept those devices when working in a working inclusive environment. Another thing is, for me, I have neck fusion. As some of you guys don't know, I have back fusion and neck fusion. I am tired of sitting, by the way, and I have to stand up for a long, to practice it. Sometimes when I stand so long, I have to have a chair as a reasonable accommodation. That, guys, is a minimal reasonable accommodation or adaptation for persons with disabilities or individuals that are veterans. Another is, the last thing I want to discuss is noise. Those with PTS, the veterans with PTS or any individual with PTS, they don't like certain noises. Like the vents, I don't hear the vents, but some people do hear the vents that are running. They'd rather be in an environment that is quiet and peaceful where they can work independently. Those are all of the different types of reasonable accommodations that can really meet ADA compliance, which is minimum ADA requirements, that can be compliant when including people with disabilities. So to really sort this out, I just want to make sure that each and every one of you that I'm here as your resource. I will always be here to make sure that I can educate and provide you for any feedback. But also, I want you to understand that the 90-day grace period is for all people, not just people with disabilities or veterans, but I do include you with that. And then the value of communication and the value of accessibility. Thank you.
Got a lot of thoughts about everything that's been said. 47 years of law practice has made me sit here and wonder how many of you are of the opinion that our United States government right now has too damn many agencies that are trying to tell you how to run your business. I am not against American with Disabilities Act at all, and we haven't discussed this. I had a legal secretary some years back that I hired that was wheelchair bound. I was coming back from court and I called her to tell her how important I had to file a motion that afternoon. She told me that she had to go to a wheelchair whatever activity and that she couldn't be there, she had to leave. I had to explain to her that that's not how it works. You hired on with me, I hired you, I like your work, but the work comes first. She politely told me she was going. I politely told her not to come back tomorrow. I was kidded a lot about Jim's the only guy to ever fire a secretary by rolling her out in her wheelchair into the parking lot. The next one, Sykes Barbecue. I always like to cite the reality because we don't trust lawyers. Sometimes they make things up. A little barbecue place, been in business 50 years in Birmingham, Alabama. About 2 years ago, we got an ADA complaint against us. The primary complaint was that the wheelchair accessible ramp was about 1.5 inches off. In other words, it was a concrete riser onto the first step. In the age of electronics, everything's changed in the law and electronics. The first thing that we did was we checked out the name of the complainant. We found out Bessemer, Alabama is a subset of Birmingham. We found out that she was a professional ADA wheelchair-bound person who had filed 73 complaints the same day. Some of the businesses she had not even been to, attempted to access. Other people had gone who were professionals. Your grab bar was too high. I'm all for American with Disabilities Act, but 73 complaints in one day. And you know who was really behind it? A law firm. A law firm that was using her as a shill. 73 complaints. Almost all of those, if you remediate, which we had to come in and remediate, you're okay. Now, the other thing that I take minor issue with Carl on is I'd be very careful about, quote, what I'll call coddling the discharged employee. I did it in a company that I had to take over because a client died. I'm the CEO of it in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, a little football place where people play. We had an employee who was stealing. When my client died, one day before on her deathbed, a little company called Always There. We provide caregivers, LPNs, kind of like this national advertising, visiting angels. We discovered she had been stealing $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 over about a year period, but I couldn't let her go because she had ingratiated herself to where she was the prime, she knew everything. I called the CPA in, we sat down and had a come to Jesus meeting with her and said, don't steal anymore. Now that's a bad situation when you have to tell an employee, quote, don't steal anymore. But I kept her on for a year and a half till I could get other people that could understand the information that she had been keeping in her own private, let's call it her own private registry. When she realized she was about to be terminated, she walked into our conference room and apparently sat down. Now this is an active case, so I realize I might get in trouble, but hey, at my age, let me get in trouble. She walked in, sat down, and hollered the classic TV thing we've all heard, I have fallen and I can't get up, just before I could get there to discharge her. Allah, she calls for the paramedics. Off she goes. The next thing I know, she has her workman's comp claim, and I know that if I let her go, she is going to file retaliation. She's going to probably file an EEOC complaint, Equal Opportunity Commission. We're living in a world where you as business people, sitting here up here listening to this, here's a couple of practical things. First of all, thank goodness we have very expensive employee liability insurance. Because between the workman's comp case, a retaliation claim, which is a jury claim and could be very high damages, the EEOC case, our, quote, attorney that the insurance company assigns us informs me that we have a $10,000 deductible and he's billing $475 an hour. So we're going to get real quick to that $10,000 level. Now, a couple of practical points. I think your CPA is the one that's going to have to help you out on this, because I'm getting old and maybe a little senile, but what I heard, Carl did a wonderful job of explaining it. But if you're like me, you almost tuned out at some point and you said, you know, I'm not totally sure I can really take all this in. It's been my experience that a qualified, not a bookkeeper, but a certified public accountant will be up on this. So at least to get you kicked off, perhaps you need to have a sit-down 2-hour discussion and have this with you. And if your CPA says, I don't know anything about that, my suggestion is you find a professional. There are people that make a whole living off of dealing with government regulations. Now, I've kind of digressed, and I want to stay on topic here, but I got a couple of points. One of the most important things we have an association to offer you is the Legal Defense Fund. We think we explain what it is, but we don't do a very good job of it. So I'm going to make it really short. But if you are, I'll call it attacked by a government agency, there's so much to not answering questions to begin with. They often catch you off guard, and they want to ask you. About 10 years ago, the IRS had a program called 10 Questions that they wanted to interview the CEO first before they ever got to the staff. We routinely refused to do it because they were trick questions. They were the wife-beating questions. Do you still beat your wife? Yes. No, you used to beat her. You stopped. So back to the point. I'm down on government, really, really bad. You people are the first rung of enterprise. You people are probably the first people to be picked on by wage and hour, by all the rest of these people. So you don't have to cooperate at the first level. You can contact this association. We can't always, in the early days, I used to go to California and try cases for some of our members or wherever. We're too big now to do that for everyone. But the one thing I can do for you, and this association wants to do it, would be to come to your state, find an attorney that specializes in whatever the issue is that is bothering you. Perhaps negotiate with them as to fees, as to how much of a chance do you have. Carl works with me. We jointly work together. If we determine that the case is so serious, meaning that it will set such a bad precedent, then we have to go before a board, the legislative committee. We have to ask for money. They generally listen to us. If we say, look, we need to pitch some money in here to help this smaller distributor be able to defend themselves. That's part of what you're getting. That's part of, in my opinion, you learn a lot about product and distribution and all, but that's called the first line of defense. I'm thinking of Tom Brenwall here. I'm thinking of many of you that we've been involved with, and to Tom's credit, he's the man who fought the IRS and won all the way to the tax court. I got involved in this association by Tom Yeager. Most of you don't even know that name, but it was a battle against the IRS on the employer-employee issue. So just a couple other quick, we're running kind of close. What I heard today, how many of you, did you know this was coming is one question by raise of hands. We got how many back here? How did you find out? I'm just curious. Stand up and holler at me. The accountant. Who else? Anybody else? Payroll people? That's an excellent point. How many of you have employee practices liability? Somebody's got to have it. Haas has it. In today's world, did we have any more back there? Talk to your insurance agent and talk to them soon, because your employee practices liability is one of your most important things that would help you with things like the EEOC. And as I said earlier, don't let me slide here. I've been practicing law 45 years. I haven't run companies. I am now running this company in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and the EEOC claim is filed against me. Not personally, but always there, James E. Roberts, director, CEO. So it's kind of ironic that toward the end of my career, I'm in a position many of you are in. I have to be very careful lawyers make the worst witnesses in the world, and we thought we'd get to depositions and how to handle them because that's been a popular topic. You have to stay calm. You have to have good representation. Not every lawyer knows everything. Some of them think they do. My first note was when he says, we don't know everything, I said, well, you'll have to talk to my wife because she frequently tells me that I think I know everything. Any quick question? We've got a few minutes. Any questions?
Yes, Mr. Geegan in the back. If you wait just 1 second, the microphone, maybe stand up and then.
I just want to emphasize how important what Jim just said is correct. Your general liability insurance does not cover an EPL claim. You need to purchase that coverage. If you have 5 or more employees, the odds are very high you will encounter an EPL claim within the next 10 years. And even with the coverage, you may win the war, but the cost of the battle is very expensive. The minimum deductible, as everyone knows it, is really a retention, is $10,000. Most of them are 25 and 40. You will have a lot of out-of-pocket, but at least you'll have the defense coverage. I have a large client back in the Northeast that's in our business, ice cream, and he had a claim from an employee in the warehouse. They were harassing him daily. He goes to the EEOC, gets free defense, and the claim is presented against the employer. It ended up a $40,000 deductible. That was just the legal fees, even though he lost. So it's important to get EPL coverage. Your general liability does not cover it.
Good point.
Thank you for that, amen. And by the way, we're sitting here looking at a situation where even your best employees are being told by certain, I don't know if they're getting it from the internet or what, but they have a list of 10 ways that you can, if you get fired, terminated, or otherwise, that you can start going down the list of government agencies. And here's a bad thing. It's gotten so bad that if they file a claim against you and you win, their attorney, in order to encourage people to file claims, still gets an attorney's fee from the United States government, which is normally assessed against you. Now, remember what I said? Even if they lose, you win, they still get attorney's fees. Now, by the way, this lady with the 53 complaints at Sykes Barbecue and city actually went after municipalities. I have a hunch that there's money being split between her, and she can be paid under certain legal circumstances from the attorneys who are collecting fees for requiring these businesses to make these accommodations. Next question.
Good point. Now's the time. They're in the back.
When it comes to overtime, what's the law as it pertains to commission-based sales drivers?
Oh, that's a great question.
Pertain to what, though?
Okay, let me repeat that. It's a question based on how commissions interplay. If you have those type of issues, I have a secondary handout for you that is general guidelines on lots of those issues. Great point, and it does factor in. Excellent point, but it's a little too dense for now. Let me give you some more information on that.
The one thing that comes to mind that affects you folks, about, what, 5 years ago, Walmart got hit for an incredible amount of money because the butchers were coming in, putting on their, do y'all remember this? They were putting on their white outfits and their little net hats, and then required to clock in. It was well established that the moment they enter those premises, John L. Lewis, portal to portal probably, and I think it was in the $100 million throughout the country, and that's the ones they really like. I was thinking about your freezer people. If they come in, suit up, and then clock in, watch out. That could be a problem. Go ahead. Another question back there.
Yeah.
Right.
Just one point on your EPL coverage. It's designed to cover you for sexual harassment in the workplace, wrongful termination, those type of issues. As an add-on to the policy is the employment wage and fee coverage. It's not totally, you don't have the coverage of your whole limit on the policy. It's usually capped at $50,000 or $100,000. So it's very important, especially with the actions I've been involved with. It becomes class action by a number of employees, and it's very, very expensive.
Good point.
Good.
Good point. Any other questions before we wrap?
Yes, I hope that you guys, for the next 5 minutes, could touch on the sexual harassment at the workplace. Some might not be really familiar with it, and by the time they find out, it's maybe too late and very costly.
Any reference, when you go into the workplace to sex, you have to walk on broken glass. Another case, I love real examples, Shelby Concrete, client of mine in Alabama. One of the senior management walked up to one of the ladies and commented, I don't know, you ladies would know, but she was wearing a black, I guess, kind of a wool outfit. And like an idiot, his comment is, you wouldn't have so much lint on your back if you would, in effect, be standing up more, implying that she was engaging in sexual conduct. Well, that case, I warned a man named Bobby Knox. We litigated, or we took depositions for about 1.5 years, and he did not have employee liability coverage. So toward the end of the situation, I began to see that he was going to get hit, and get hit hard. Well, to keep my perfect record, I sent him a letter and told him that since he wouldn't settle for $50,000, he needed to find himself another lawyer. My wife and I, Bonnie, about 6 months later, were coming back. We'd been out of the country. I called that law firm and I said, well, how did it go? Lawyer on the other end, thinking he was making fun of me, said a judgment for $2 million. I thought he was saying, you wimpy guy. You tried to take $50,000 of your client's good money and just throw it away. The phone went silent for a minute, and I said, now come on, tell me the truth. He said, $2 million jury verdict. If that doesn't get your attention, nothing will. Now, though, it's expanded, as most of these government things do. Sexual harassment has gone now to well, we've covered this before, it's a hostile workplace. What's a hostile workplace? That's one calendar, and it's not just your employees, it's the people that are coming to you, independent contractors, that are having to look at a picture. In my day, it would have been Marilyn Monroe, a calendar on the wall or out in the mechanic shop. It is a time bomb waiting to go off, and it is hard to get insurance for that because it's so easy to trip that. And it can be male, by the way. Let me bring you up to date. We used to think it was women sexually harassed. There's a lot of cases right now where males have filed and received large settlements.
Let me add one thing, if I could. That was a good point. One of the things I think you need to be aware of, going back to this one slide, two thoughts. One, communicate early and often on every sensitive subject. The more sensitive, the more communication. Two, recognize that who you are. So for example, if I want to learn about social inclusion, that's why I said, Dylan, you have to come and talk. Don't let me try to explain a situation. He knows the information intimately. So sometimes if you're in a male-dominated environment, you need to take a step back and get out of that environment. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of men sitting around putting together their sexual discrimination policy. You need to be inclusive. So you have got to recognize what your situation is, whether it's with harassment, sexual discrimination, racial discrimination, whatever the case is, and understand that you have your own internal biases. Get the opinion when you draft your sexual discrimination policy of your female employees, of your female management. Get them involved. They have concepts that we're not thinking about. And get it out there and have a zero tolerance policy, and every employee in your organization should know that you believe that any type of discrimination is absolutely unacceptable. That way you're going to get the feedback on what's really happening, and it's not going to occur, and then like Jim says, then you have a $2 million problem on your hands. Any other questions before we wrap? Okay, go ahead, Carl.
That's right. Did you hear what Carl said? Sometimes there are times when your ego and pride get in the way. Mine would in this EEOC case. I got to be very careful because I let somebody stay on that had been stealing from the company. Well, that was my fault. You know, the first day that we learned, of course, I did call the CPA in and say, all right, do you want to regurgitate right now your transgressions? Because here's a list of them that we already have. Credit cards that were bogused up in order to look like they were the company always there. I made a mistake. Don't tell my wife that. I probably should have let her go and then tried to rebuild from extraneous sources, if that's a good word, the information that she had. And that's another thing. Don't let one employee hold you hostage to information you need. Go ahead.
Before we finish, I wanted to share a story of sexual harassment in my company. About 15 years ago, employee of us, she complained that somebody in the office continuously joking with her. We called both of them, talked to them, made the guy to apologize, and we thought the matter is closed, and we even wrote up the guy. 6 months later, she quit, she sued us, and we lost because we thought we did everything right, but they said that you knew that this guy is capable of it, but still you allow that person to be in that environment. And it cost us over $500,000. So please take it seriously and make sure that people understand your culture, your environment, and this could bankrupt you. So with that, I thank the panel for information. They are here throughout the convention, throughout today and tomorrow. And feel free to approach them for any questions and concern. And our legislative committee chair and Jim Robert, we are always as a service, we are at your service. And if there is something we can do, please reach out. With that, we're going to have conclude this seminar, and we are going to have a 15 minutes break. Then we are going to have a special event marketing, and we have a special guy that has done it in Texas for us, and it was enormous success. And they're going to share all of that experience with you within 15 minutes after the break. And I highly recommend to be part of that seminar. You could make lots of money with that. Thank you.
Thank you. You did a beautiful job.
Yeah.